Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's FP virtual dialogue, Defending Democracy, How Young Change Makers and are demanding progress, and where we'll discuss the growing dissatisfaction with democracy among youth populations globally and what policies and initiatives are needed to defend democracy. My name is Maggie Lake, and it's my pleasure to be your moderator this morning. Over the last few decades, countries around the world have experienced a decline in formal political participation by youth, as well as growing distrust in established political institutions. This younger generation is also inheriting a slew of complex and intersecting challenges, including economic and social inequity, environmental degradation, and geopolitical competition and conflict. At the same time, young people are finding new and innovative ways to participate in civic and political life and address these challenges on their own terms. Against this backdrop, we've gathered a group of policymakers and young activists to help us unpack these complex issues and discuss this younger generation's relationship to democracy and what the path forward looks like. Before diving in, I'd like to extend a big thanks to the National Democratic Institute for helping make this event possible. NDI has worked with young people in more than 120 programs worldwide across geographic regions to support them in playing a more active role in building strong and vibrant democracies, democratic societies. So today's topic is close to their mission. Specifically in 2021, NDI launched a global campaign called Speak Youth to Power, aimed at increasing the visibility and impact of young people's contributions to political activism and bolstering youth participation and influence in the decision-making spaces. They're collaborating with young people who are traditionally underrepresented, especially young women and young people with diverse identities, as well as educating and collaborating with those who already have power so that they understand the benefits of true power sharing with young people and put it into practice, importantly. You can see more about the campaign on their website, ndi.org, and on social media using the hashtag #YouthToPower. Now, a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We want to make sure that we can hear from you, our audience. We have thousands of people tuned in and watching our live streams on social media. We have reserved a portion of this event for questions from our global audience. So here's how you can write to us and participate. If you're on Zoom, click the Q&A button below and submit your question. Please be sure to tell us your name, organization, and where you're writing from. If you're joining us on the phone or watching a live stream, you can email us your questions. The address is events@foreignpolicy.com. Of course, we encourage you to chime in on social media. Be sure to use the hashtag Defending Democracy. All right, let's get started. To kick things off, I am honored to begin the program with Congresswoman Sara Jacobs. Welcome, Congresswoman. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you just flew in back to DC from California. So excited to be able to catch up with you. First of all, let's just start out, give us your assessment of the current relationship between young people and democracy. What are you hearing when you talk to your younger constituents?
Yeah, well, first, it's so great to be here with you all. Look, I think that we are seeing the trend of democratic backsliding here in America, just like we're seeing it around the world. My fourth day in office was January 6th. I was trapped in the House gallery with my colleagues. While I have experience working on electoral violence and political violence and coup attempts around the world, it was really shocking to me that it was actually here in the United States, in the Capitol, that we actually came so close to having our elections overturned. And I think, when it comes to young people, I think for a really long time, we haven't really known a government that works for us. Here in the United States, I was in middle school when September 11th happened. So me and my generation and the next generations, we've never known a United States that isn't at war. We've never known a country where school shootings aren't regular, and frankly, where it feels like our leaders are looking out for us and trying to protect us from them. We haven't known a world where climate change isn't up for debate, even though so many of us young people know very clearly that it's real and are seeing the consequences. And so, I understand why so many young people are frustrated. I'm frustrated. And it's honestly part of the reason why I ran for Congress to begin with, because I feel like we need more young people at the table when these decisions are being made, because we are the ones who are going to have to live with the consequences longer than anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a way to start your career. And I'm sure you'll look back on that as a really pivotal moment. And I think this speaks to a lot of us because I have two teenagers, who I think share a lot of the feelings that you just expressed. I know that you have traveled abroad as well. You spent a lot of time in Africa. Um, Talk to me about some of the commonalities, because it's not often that we can say in developed countries and emerging countries. I mean, this seems to be a global problem. Um, is it the same issues that you hear resonating? I mean, they are complex, but they sound like I would think many of the young people listening, no matter where they're sitting, can relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, I actually just recently got back from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Tanzania, where we met with civil society folks, met with young people, talked about the state of democracy. I think I've been to the continent of Africa 6 times this year. I think there are a lot of commonalities, right? Young people across the world are feeling this frustration that governments aren't delivering on the things we care about, whether it's climate change, whether it's just basic service delivery. And I think there are some unique things, especially when we're looking at sub-Saharan Africa. For instance, sub-Saharan Africa has the youngest population in the world, fastest growing population. Majority of people there are under the age of 18. And so as we're thinking about democracy there, I think it's really important that we see that this group of young people, a lot of what they're seeing is the string of coups across the Sahel, is Western partners still working with authoritarian governments that they don't necessarily agree with or feel like are corrupt and are stealing from their future. And so I think it's really important that we both have a lot of humility in the United States to say, like, we want to be partners with you. We understand that our democracy is also fragile. We are fighting a lot of similar things, and we need to work together and to make sure that we in the United States are, working to make sure that we're not feeding into that disillusionment, that we're not partnering with corrupt and authoritarian governments that are just further separating young people from the feeling that democracy works for them, and that we're not only engaging on democracy when it's an election, but that we're actually working in between elections to make sure all the other parts of democracy, like an open society, open press, ability to protest and to speak, and all of that is also being protected.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? It's not just an issue every time there is a ballot out. I mean, this is, it's a sort of day-to-day work that needs to be done to rebuild trust. What I hear I hear you say several times, and whether we're talking about the US or Africa, a frustration and a feeling that government's not working for them, that government's not delivering for this younger generation. What can be done to help restore that trust and build back those bridges?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it sounds simple, but it's harder than it sounds. But honestly, like, ask young people what they care about and then deliver on it, right? Like, be thoughtful and intentional about how you're bringing them into the political process, but also understand that, like, you can't dismiss young people's desires and needs just because they're young. One of the things that used to frustrate me so much is before the Dobbs decision was handed down, for instance, I would hear from colleagues all the time that, like, we needed to be talking about things that really impact real people, like infrastructure and healthcare. We can't be talking about wedge issues like reproductive healthcare and abortion. Well, if you're of reproductive age, reproductive healthcare is basically your healthcare, right? Like, for many, many years, my OBGYN was the only doctor that I went to. And so dismissing those concerns and not delivering on them, it really feeds into that disillusionment. The same thing around gun violence, right? We saw for so many years that people were not really addressing gun violence, even though we as young people we're feeling it. We're feeling the consequences of it, right? I'm from the Columbine generation, and we now have generation lockdown. We know that young people are uniquely impacted by this issue. And yet government wasn't doing anything about it. And so I'm actually really proud that in the last Congress, we actually saw some amazing progress because of young people leading the way and because of their advocacy and activism. Historic funding in climate action, the first significant gun safety legislation since in elementary school. We now have our first Gen Z member of Congress. Like, we are seeing progress, but a big piece of that is actually just recognizing what young people care about, asking them, and then actually talking about those issues and not just dismissing them.
Yeah. Do young people need to see more of themselves in leadership? You're one of the youngest serving members of the House. How do we develop the leaders of tomorrow? How do we pull young people into leadership positions and into the formal political process?
Yeah, look, I'm always for more young people getting involved in politics and in office. And it's honestly one of the reasons I ran for office to begin with. I was basically told that if I wanted there to be more young people in office, I had to run myself. This was never my plan to be an elected official. So I definitely think it helps when you see people who look like you in office. We sort of keep a running list of stories of young girls who see me on the campaign trail and how they react. And I keep their pictures in my office to remind me why I'm doing this on the hard days. So I absolutely think we need to make sure we're getting more young people into leadership positions. And a big piece of that is actually respecting young people. I mean, I can't tell you when I was running for office how many times people would say things like, oh, you're too young. Why don't you wait your turn? Why don't you do this? And I think we need to really shift the way we think about leadership, because we do need more young people at the table. We need more young people to get other young people involved, but also because, like I said at the beginning, we are the ones who are going to be living with the consequences of the decisions being made right now. We have a lot of skin in the game, and we should get a say and be at the table when those decisions are being made.
Absolutely. We're going to wrap it up in just a moment, but I didn't want to leave without you've had a lot of experience when it comes to, let's just say, digital engagement, right? Founding CEO of Project Connect, you worked on a UNICEF's innovation unit. Can social platforms be leveraged to help engage youth and defend democracy, or is it a double-edged sword and something we need to watch out for? How do we leverage the good in it without opening up the dangers of it? Big question to leave you with as your last one, but
yeah, no, I think the answer is both. One of the things that my office is spending a lot of time looking at right now is sort of the global governance of AI and how we can set up guardrails to ensure that these emerging technologies aren't, exacerbating inequality and fostering disinformation. And I think a key piece of that is making sure that we are using technology to expand access to democracy and good governance, and teaching young people in particular, but really everyone, what skills they need to know and to have to be an informed recipient of the information they're receiving. So, when I worked at UNICEF, one of the things we looked at was what we called information poverty. And it was really looking at, like, what kinds of skill sets do young people need so that the information they're getting, they know what to do with, right? It's about critical thinking skills. It's about changing the way we think about education. It used to be like memorizing all these things and making sure you knew exact dates for things. Well, you can look all those things up, but now you need to figure out if what you're looking up is actually accurate. Another thing we did at UNICEF that is still a project that they have ongoing is called YouReport. And it actually used social media and technology and SMS to get young people more involved in the decision-making process. And they send out a text message being like, does the well in your community work? What did you learn in school this week? And then they do a heat map of all the responses that they get. And so you really start to create that two-way feedback loop where, one, young people are being asked, it's informing government, but they're also recognizing that they deserve to have a say, and that you are starting to build that supply and demand side of good governance and of that two-way feedback loop.
And evidence that they're being heard, right? I mean, that's what we all want to know, that the responses that we take the time to give political leaders are being heard and registered and then acted on. I think that's something that's really important to that follow through. Well, Congresswoman Jacobs, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your service. There's a fantastic saying that the Gina Davis Foundation in Hollywood has, that if you can see it, you can be it. And it's something that I've talked to her a lot about, and never ceases to have a lot of power. So I'm sure you're inspiring a lot of people out there, and we couldn't need it more than right now. So we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
All right, I'd like to welcome the State Department Special Envoy for Global Youth Issues, Abby Finkenauer, to continue the conversation. Welcome, Abby. And this is going from strength to strength. We have another shining example of a young person who answered the call of public service, elected to the House of Representatives at 28. In the first 2 weeks, you were the youngest woman to pass a bill through the House. So maybe it'd be interesting to hear a little bit. We're talking about the need to sort of engage and pull young people into the the formal political system. What motivated you at such a young age to enter politics?
Yeah, well, first of all, so grateful to get to join you today. And also shout out to Congresswoman Jacobs. Always good to see her as well. But yeah, so my story is, I would say, sadly, a little unique for Congress, and it shouldn't be. I'm somebody who grew up in a small town with literally more cows than people. First generation college. My dad was a union pipe fitter welder, and my mom was a public school secretary. And growing up, I mean, I literally didn't know anybody in politics or had ever met really somebody who was making laws or making policy before. And the only person that I knew in public service was my grandfather, who was a firefighter. And I remember growing up, I'd go to, my small elementary school. There were like 9 kids in my class. And we would get this weekly reader, which was basically a kid's version of what was going on in the world. And I'd read that, and I realized at a really young age that what was happening overseas was impacting my small town. And also what was happening in my small town, in my small agricultural community, was impacting what was happening overseas as well. And it was really important to pay attention. And so I did. And then I asked my parents for a subscription to Newsweek when I was about 10. And I would read it. And my parents still say it's the best investment they ever made. And then I would hang out with my grandfather and my uncles. It was so traditional. This was in Iowa in the 90s, and it was just really traditional. We'd go to church on Saturday nights, and then afterwards we'd have dinner together. And at the dinner table after dinner was my grandfather and the uncles, and they'd be talking about what's happening in the world. And they all had different viewpoints. So my grandfather was a Democrat, another uncle was a Democrat, and one was a Republican. And so there'd be so many, discussion points going back and forth. And sometimes it would get really heated. And yet I remember the biggest thing that those nights taught me, there were 2. One was that my grandfather made sure I knew that because I was a young girl, I also deserved every right to a seat at the table as the grown men. And then also, after we would get into it and go back and forth, we'd leave at the end of the night and hug each other and say, "Can't wait to see you next week."
Yeah.
And there was
perhaps the missing part.
Exactly.
Of today's discourse.
Yeah. And I just thought that that's how it was supposed to work. And so I just kept paying attention. And when I was 24, after I'd been a page in the U.S. House of Representatives, I applied to do that when I was in high school. And the reason I did that is truly, I must have gotten on some list somewhere, but I would get so many things in the mail in high school from kind of fancy colleges and universities that had really nice camps for political science that cost thousands of dollars, which I think are, great camps, but it was something my family absolutely could not afford. It was not even in the wheelhouse. So I would always throw those away. And then I found the opportunity to be a U.S. congressional page. I applied, got accepted, and it was my first time ever on a plane, was to go from Iowa to Washington, D.C. And that's where I got to actually see government for the first time and really opened my eyes of what was possible. And how important it was to start paying attention at a young age.
And be engaged. So much of that person, I think it's so important to share that personal story, because so much of that I think is going to thread to the youth activists that are coming after you in terms of economic access, education, curiosity, and feeling like you have the right and responsibility to engage, because this will directly impact you, but that
Right.
change is possible and compromise is needed. Like, all of those things are such important lessons to have early. So you're at the State Department now.
Yeah.
Why is this issue a foreign policy issue? Or why is this something that the State Department's paying attention to?
Yeah. So just a little background on the Global Youth Office. It actually got started back in 2010, coming out of the Arab Spring, truly, where the Clinton State Department was looking around and going, oh, okay, if we're going to care about democracy, right, and global security, we better be talking to our young people, who are the ones who are rising up and demanding change. And so that is truly kind of the impetus of how the office got started. And then it's been kind of in different iterations. In fact, the first senior advisor, I believe I got the title right, for this office was actually Ronan Farrow. And then after that was an amazing woman called Zinat Rahman, who is now the head of the University of Chicago Institute of Politics. And so they both started building it out. And then there was a civil servant who did some great work as well, Andy Rabins, for a while in the office. And then it went dormant in 2019. And it was President Biden and the team at the State Department who thought that this would be something that they really wanted to make sure was elevated. And they decided to make this role the special envoy role, which was the first time they'd ever done that before. And part of it was because of the history of President Biden in foreign affairs and the fact that he also got elected to the US Senate at 29 years old and understood, oh my goodness, we need to be doing even more to reach young people all over the globe. And at first, I, again, was kind of surprised because a lot of Iowans, right? It makes sense. Many go to USDA, where we have an Iowan as literally our Secretary of Department of Agriculture. And I did not have many stamps on my passport. I was, international relations was not something that I had spent a lot of time in. And so I was kind of like, okay, how does this exactly make sense? And then we talked about it. And the big reason that this was so important and have somebody who had run for office at a young age is because of the fact that we have got to be reaching young people who have not seen their path in a traditional way, right? So to kind of break through those barriers of what they think is possible in their country, of who can lead and why we need them to be stepping up. And I guess my story helps with that a bit. So
well,
it's been absolutely wonderful.
It's so true. And I actually just had chills on my arm, because it's such an important message. And we just talked when we ended with Congressman Jacobs about, if you can see it, you can be it. But the idea that, it's maybe not going to look like the path before if you're going to pull more young people in. I think that is such an important point to make. So what do you see? Where are you leaning into? What do you see that could move the needle in terms of increasing that intergenerational political collaboration, not only in terms of actual young people entering and running for office, but just participating in government? What are you leaning into? What is your department, the State Department, think is working and can make a difference?
Yeah, so civic engagement is one of the top things that we are working on. And it is really that idea of changing mindsets of, a lot of young people we're working with, if they're in one of our great leadership programs, which I can dive into as well, they're there because they care, right? They care and they care about the policy. But we want them to go from caring about the policy to actually becoming policymakers themselves and creating those support networks to make sure that they're able to do so. And look, the other reality is that I talk to, I will share with anybody who will listen, and something I did not expect to dive into as much in this role, but has become a huge priority, is the fact that we can ask young people to run and be involved and be vocal about what they care about. However, we also need to make sure we're building those support systems to keep them safe and keep them supported when they do, because of the level of online harassment, hate, extremism that is happening. Yes, here in the United States, something I dealt with, death threats, right? Disgusting harassment. I mean, to the point where you kind of ask yourself, how much do you give up to be in public service, right? And these are questions I ask myself at points. And then I know now, after I've traveled the world from Albania, Cambodia, Luxembourg, to France, to South Africa, Kenya, Thailand, like wherever I'm at, this is coming up, and young people are dealing with it in every aspect. And believe there's a stat that says last year was the first year in 30 years that the number of women who are elected or running for office globally actually decreased. And I am really concerned that we're going to see that continue to plummet if we are not doing that work to help, create those support networks and build that into our programming as well. And I'm just really grateful that the work this department does in our regional leadership programs is really focused on that resiliency piece of building those connections. So it's not just kind of a hierarchy of like, we'll take care of you. It's more of a building those support networks of their peers as well to be there for each other. And I think it's just a really underrated and important piece of this work, and something that is going to be vital for future democracies all over the globe.
Absolutely. And again, it cuts across borders. We see young people, any kind of marginalized person who's able to get into office, threatened and harassed in a way. And it's in developed countries as well as emerging, as well as new democracies. And it is a massive problem, as you say. And it really speaks to, I think, what a concern is, that it's great to say we want young people involved and to try to engage them, but how do you not unduly shift the burden on them and say, it's all up to you? Even peer networks, what's the responsibility in terms of elected officials and existing democratic institutions to, as you say, create that support network and use their power to stand behind and truly power share with the younger people coming up?
Yeah, I mean, it's so vitally important, because the thing, as I go out and I'm talking to young people, again, all over the globe, but also here in the US as well, we have to talk about institutional barriers, right? Institutional barriers that exist, the way that government systems work. And even, in some countries, they're dealing with corruption. They're dealing with really tough, even trying to figure out, the disinformation piece. So we're working on media literacy, that piece of it. And there's just so much that young people are facing, but also that personal piece. And look, we can't solve the institutional piece overnight. That is not something that just like anybody can wave a magic wand and fix. But these are things that we can get young people to be talking about and be pushing back on, which then can help change the narrative and what's even acceptable in places. And that's something we're working on. But the biggest thing that we're pushing is really just discussing those personal barriers as well, that often young people will even place on themselves, thinking that it's too big or they can't do it. But we also have to step up and be good partners, right? Again, and not just put it on them. And so it is a lot of building partnerships. It's a lot of just continuing to uplift these young people who are doing the work, not leaving them out, right? And then also not just including them in a way that is really just performatory, right? Of, well, we checked a box. And also you cannot just assume, right? Like it's global youth issues. Like you can't just assume that global youth issues is climate change. Like that is, yes, a big one for very good reasons. Education is a big one, but so is national security. Right. So is, job opportunities, economic growth.
Economics is a huge problem. And they know that. They're smart. They're paying attention. They know that their prospects of the future are dimmer and seem harder, and
Yeah.
so it's incredibly critical. Abby, amazing. We had a comment from Philippe saying, is the glass half empty or half full? If you, not you, but if people keep continuing to say it's half empty, you are colluding with those who want to destroy democracy. And I have to say, your positive energy, your service so far, the example that you're sending out is amazingly inspirational. So I feel like we're leaning into that half full. And thank you for the fantastic work you're doing. It's so important.
Well, thank you, thank you. And I would 1,000% say it is half full, more than half full. I've never had more hope than I have now, getting to meet these young people again all over the globe. And I'll tell you shortly, I know we're probably tight on time, but I think this is important to share. I was in Indonesia recently with this Waisili Academy, our Young Southeast Asia Leadership Institute, and it was an incredible program with young women leaders on climate change. And the last day we were doing a service project in mangroves, doing mangrove cleanup. And no one knew what it was actually going to be like that day, but we were told, you'd have boots and you'd go on the shoreline and pick up trash. Well, here we get there, and then we were told it was high tide. And I'm going, oh my goodness, what is going to happen? And so we're walking through these mangroves to an area, like a beach area, where you could pick up trash from the sidelines. Well, these girls, though, they saw the trash in the water. And instead of waiting till we got to this beach area, get in the water and start pushing the trash towards the side. And as I watched that, as these girls who very fabulous, had their sunglasses on, their hair was all done for the day. And they just, no one told them to. They just got in the water because they saw the trash that needed to be cleaned up. And I'm watching this, and the first thing I thought was, oh my goodness, are there snakes? And then the second thing I thought was, wow, these women, these young people are going to save the damn world. And it has been absolutely extraordinary to be a part of, to get to see, to get to highlight. And I am so, so, so hopeful for the future.
That's an amazing tale to tell. And, we have social media hashtags here. NDI has one, Youth to Power. If you have also seen an example like that, do us a favor, share it, because we all need that inspiration. And there are amazing things happening. We just need to plug in and support. So Abby, thank you so much for joining us today and for the great work you're doing.
Thank you. This is wonderful.
It was wonderful. And we're going to keep going on that wonderful theme. Our next conversation is going to take us a more specific look at the regional strategies for bolstering youth participation in democracy. I am so pleased to welcome our panelists, Lou Argueta, Secretary General, Latin America Youth Network for Democracy, Marina Chikosh, Project Officer, Feren Amenka International Network, and Eliud Lutza, co-founder of Inobid and Yay, advisor at the International Trade Center in Kenya. Welcome to all of you. This is where the inspiration keeps going. So you're all working hard, boots on the ground on some of the very big topics that we just discussed. So if we could just go around and each of us tell us a little bit about what you're doing and the work that you're doing on the ground in the region to foster more youth participation. And Lou, let's start with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Maggie, and thank you to Foreign Policy and NDI for having us today. So I'm currently the Secretary General for the Latin American Youth Network for Democracy, and this is basically a regional organization and a network as well that works to defend democracy and human rights in over 20 countries in the Latin America and Caribbean region. We focus on empowering youth leaders in civil society and politics, anything from student leaders to activists, journalists in their professional trajectories, and by offering them opportunities as well for them to develop their skills and acquire any insights or knowledge specific to what they do. And they also have the chance to participate in international forums, for example, and interact with high-level leaders within their countries and the region. As of today, there are over 30 current members and alumni that are holding or have held public service positions. I know this doesn't sound like a lot because we have been working with these people since 2014, but and I know from what we have just heard from Representative Jacobs and U.S. Special Envoy to Youth Benkenauer, being in a public service position it requires a lot of work and a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge. So we take our job very seriously in teaching young leaders who do want to serve in these positions, and we've had them serving as ministers, vice ministers, members of parliament, members of councils, and recognized leaders of local, national, and international organizations as well. So our hope is to empower the coming generation and give them the tools that they need so they can defend democracy once they are in decision-making positions.
That's amazing. Listen, when you said 30, I thought, wow, that's a lot. So I think we know how hard it is, but I like that you're ambitious and that you'd like that number to be much higher. Iliad, what about you?
Yeah, thank you so much, Maggie, for having me. So my name is Edward Luther. I am a co-founder at Innobid, which is a tech startup, a tech for good startup that really seeks to address corruption, specifically in public procurement by streamlining the process. I'm also the year advisor to ITC, that's the International Trade Center. And basically my work there involves working with young people, building their capacities in the entrepreneurship space. But I think titles aside, really for me, it's, what really connects to me is social innovation. And I am a social innovator and a change maker. And this really emanates from probably, if you've been familiar with the African continent, you're probably aware that first of all, it's a beautiful continent for sure. But besides that it's a continent that is plagued by, different social issues and environmental issues as well. And so what we are seeing is a new generation of young people, of course, like myself, who are just looking at these problems and saying, I think we can't wait for help from anywhere. I think we are the ones we've been waiting for. And so they are taking the mantle on themselves to actually develop solutions and interventions in the different spaces. And also just beyond them, being social innovators is also a part where they are holding leaders to account. And I think traditionally we've been told that the only way to participate, in the democratic process is through voting, which of course young people have been doing for the longest time. But in Africa, it happens that sometimes when you vote in leaders, they don't necessarily do what they promise to do. And so that's why we have the cases of corruption and some of them not delivering. Like I think the Congresswoman said, we really have that. And so what young people are doing is they know that they have the skills, they've gone through the education system and they have the skills, they have the energy, they have the passion, and they also have the anger. And they're giving that anger direction to actually hold leaders to account. And so that telling them if it's about, leveraging technology to help you streamline the procurement process, just to make it more transparent and so that, the general citizens can trust you, then that's what young people are doing, leading movements like those. And I think what we're seeing is more and more young people getting into these spaces. And we're just hoping that our voice will be heard to some point, and also that we'll get the support we need from the older generation.
Yeah, and that is an amazing point. And as you say, developing the solutions, the innovations, this is where the sort of productive way to channel your frustration is important, but you need the partnerships to do that often. Marina? Give us a little sense of, give us a sense of the work that you're doing. Oh, I think you're on mute. Are you off mute? Yes, we can hear you now.
Great. So thank you so much, Maggie, for the nice introduction, and hello from Brussels. If you haven't really known who Romani people are, here are just some information. So Roma people are the biggest ethnic minority of Europe, and we started to migrate to Europe from India actually about the 12th century. Despite of our unique and amazing culture and language and great contribution to forming today's Europe, we have been also quite marginalized and discriminated throughout the history, which has been based on anti-Gypsyism or anti-Roma racism. This is how we call it. And I'm currently working with the Piranamense International Network, which is a Roma youth civil society organization based here in Brussels, in Belgium. And yes, I mentioned, since Roma youth are one of the most marginalized and discriminated groups in Europe, We dedicated our work to fight against racism and stereotypes through non-formal education, through intercultural dialogue and engagement. Piranamence is one of the few European-level youth networks and youth organizations focused on Roma and youth issues and the intersection between the two. We have been instrumental in pushing forward the European agenda on both these topics and on issues affecting Roma youth, such as political participation, hate speech, anti-Gypsyism, lack of employment opportunities, and intersectional discrimination as well.
So fantastic, all of you. I mean, amazing the work that you're doing. You know, it's very interesting, Lou. We just had a comment in the chat. I'm going to try to pull it up, but it was something to the effect that democracy, this is from one of our listeners, democracy is not a spectator sport. I like that. The key to building coalition for change is engagement. What methods of engagement have you found work in this day and age when there is so much misinformation and polarization happening? So you've kind of successfully guided these 30 young people into these positions and created a network. What's working in terms of engagement?
So I think one of the best opportunities out there is those opportunities to be involved, for young people to be involved in international networks and organizations that work in defending democracy, or just training young people to partake in politics in their localities and communities. Those organizations and spaces that provide, activities and training that are designed to advance the personal and professional journey for each young leader and their impact, the impact that they want to have by providing resources, grants, contacts and connections, and preparing them to meet the world's challenges and the themes of defending democracy and strengthening democracy as well. This event is in partnership with NDI, and NDI is one of those organizations. And I'm gonna speak from personal experience here. We actually had a partnership with NDI back in March. They sponsored a delegation from the Latin American Youth Network for Democracy to participate in the Summit for Democracy, the second Summit for Democracy in Costa Rica. And this is actually where I got to meet Ms. Finkenauer as well. And this was a firsthand opportunity to experience the importance of defending democracy at a global scale, because it's very different when you realize that a lot of the challenges that we have in democracy and in politics are not isolated to our communities or our countries. This is, these challenges are happening all around the world. And so getting to know these challenges from other activists and the challenges that other leaders face as well, and to understand the power that we hold as young people in impacting our reality for the better, I think that's something that, very rarely I think you come across. So I would definitely take a look into any local organizations that are working to defend democracy, or working with young people to make the community better than how you first encounter it.
Absolutely. And there is a lot of support in that community and shared lessons, right? What's working? Where's the needle moving where you are, and can that be something that can be scaled someplace else? I think that's so important. Ilid, I'm very interested to hear, we have a question I think really sort of speaks to your experience, because you are an advisor at the International Trade Center in Kenya. You focus a lot on innovation. This question is from Ritika. What role can the private sector and local businesses play in supporting young people? What have you seen in terms of what's working where you are?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And I think that's a really good question. So, how can the business, sort of the business community, and even many other stakeholders work with young people? I think one thing, and from my experience, is I've learned about young people is, they have the energy, the skills, and the trust. And so, as Congresswoman mentioned this earlier, that, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa, the 60% of the population is actually young. And so like they form really the majority of the population. And so if like you wanted to get anything going in terms of, policies or maybe interventions that needed to get to communities, then you're safe working with young people because they hold the community trust, and majority of them, of the community members, are youth, are young people as well. And so really working with them, involves one, building their capacity. And I think this is one thing that I've noticed, that as much as they have the passion, of course, they know that passion alone is not enough. And so they may need to, first of all, build their capacity to be able to, cause the change that they so desperately need to change. But also there's also this cry around how can we build their, support them in resources. And this is also really, really critical in helping them also think around how can they amplify their interventions and how can they reach more people. But also, I think one thing I've also learned about young people is they really, really care about the voices on the margins. And so unlike, the traditional sort of system, the way things have been, where the marginalized groups are really left to, fend for themselves, I think we're seeing this new generation of young people who really, really think about what are the, the voices on the margins saying and how can we involve them. And I think when you come on board with such a message, such a voice, involving everyone and bringing everyone on the table and making sure that you're not treating a group of people like a homogeneous unit, but you're actually trying to identify the specific needs they have before going ahead, to change their lives or bring in intervention, that has really worked.
Absolutely. Inclusion matters. And it's not just a throwaway word for this generation, which I think is important. And by the way, inspirational. And you're right, there's a lot that can be done to amplify, right? There's expertise, there's mentoring, there's using the economic muscle of the business community to stand in solidarity with young people. Marina, I can see you nodding your head. Talk to me a little bit about what's working and what's working in terms of addressing some of the hurdles that may be out there. We have a question about from Ashok. Do the young today really understand how democracies work? How much of it is education something that we need to combat? And what do you see working in terms of that?
Well, thank you so much for the question. As Abby Finkenauer also just mentioned, when it comes to hate speech, we have a really long way to go. And also we have to educate ourselves, but also the young people, because they are one of the most affected communities who are facing with the negative consequences of hate speech. So one of the European funded projects that we have right now actually is focusing on hate speech against different minorities in Hungary, such as the Roma, the migrants, Jewish people, Muslims, and also the LGBT communities. This idea for this particular project actually was born from a previous partnership with the NDI Hungary under the Religious Freedom Program, where Pirena Mensa contributed to the work on countering online hate speech and offline hate speech as well. So in the recent years, hate speech has become one of the biggest issues, not only in Hungary, but elsewhere. And, it has a real effect on maintaining democracy in Hungary and also in Europe. So just one of the recent news I would like to share with you: on 29th August, the Nazi far-right party, Mi Hazánk, it's translated Our Home in English, who are sitting in the Hungarian parliament during an organized march, has advocated for a Hungarian National Day that is dedicated to the victims of so-called gypsy crimes. In partnership with NDI, Pirena Mensa colleagues and other inspiring Roma women created the Roma Women Network in Hungary, which has also stepped up publicly against the far-right outrageous and deeply racist initiative. The Roma Women Network wrote a public letter in which they demand politicians to stop hate speech against the Roma community and also to make initiatives that protect democracy and the rights of all citizens in Hungary. Fortunately, the message of the Roma Women's Network has generated more public curiosity than the racist initiatives itself. So it also demonstrated that when Roma women gather together and speak up, they can be the voices of democracy. Moreover, as Representative Sarah Jacobs well said, representation matters. So young Roma girls need to see other young Roma girls and also women who care about politics, who care about education, who care about democracy, and what is happening in the world around them in order for them to engage with politics in a deeper level. In the past few years, Cinnamon has also run several projects dedicated to empowering young Roma to take active part in public and political life in different countries. For instance, between 2020 and 2022, within the Roma Youth Voices project, we worked in 6 countries to gather young Roma to advocate for involving them in relevant political decision-making processes. We also continue this work under the umbrella of a current project where we train young Roma in different areas such as human rights, countering hate speech, cultural diversity, and intersectionality as well, so they can competently claim their spaces at the main tables of politics. And we have also
you're preparing them. You're preparing them for the opportunity when it comes up, which I think is so important, and why education has to be a key component of that. By the way, we have to acknowledge your fabulous T-shirt, which we were talking about before we went on air. And one of the things that's happening in the Q&A chat is so many people are asking to be connected with each other, with all of you. How can I get a list? How can I support? What can we do? And that's exactly what we want to see happen. So FP will sort of, provide for that, and hopefully be able to sort of connect, or give you all a space to connect after this is over. There's also a wonderful sentiment from someone I want to share before we go around for our last question. And Paravash writes, the involvement of youth is not something to be sought for their sake alone, nor a tool designed to advance their needs as a specific population group. Rather, it's a critical component to the well-being of all humankind, young and old alike. And I think that's a beautiful sentiment and exactly what we're talking about. So as we sort of wrap up here, if we could just quickly go around to all of you, and what do you need? We're asking people, what can businesses and local communities do? How can we get in touch with them? Lou, let's start with you. What do you need from political leaders? What is the message you have for the audience listening today?
So many things. And I think, stepping off from the last question on education, it's educating citizens about their rights and freedoms and how democracy works. This is a long-term challenge that requires constant and significant effort. And it's important to understand that defending democracy is not something that can be achieved overnight. It's not something that's, superficial, and it doesn't just involve supporting elections in your communities, although that is extremely important. We need to think more outside the box in how we defend democracy and how we keep democracy. With the global challenges that we face today, including the rise of authoritarianism and populism, it is important that political leaders and everyone involved in politics and pro-democracy activism reject narratives. And I'm, coming off from more of a communicational perspective here, but it's important to reject narratives that seek to polarize and divide societies. And I know one of the most popular narratives we hear today is one that, and it's nothing new also, it's been around for a while, but it's a narrative that requires you to choose between left or right politics, instead of, taking the time to understand that the abuses of power, the violations to human rights, populism, and authoritarianism can happen on both ends of the political spectrum. And so what really will make a difference, and I would hope that, those leaders that are in power seeking positions or decision-making positions, what will really make a difference for a safer, more equal, and better world for absolutely everyone is that we can manage and are capable as a society to think about what we need to strive towards the future rather than just being stuck in the past. And this is where young people can have an incredibly important opinion and view and perspective on how to how to, look towards the future. And I think political leaders need to listen more to that.
Beautifully said. That was a mic drop. I'm gonna have to toss it to if you just want to nod and say ditto, that's fine. But Eliud, what are your parting thoughts briefly?
Yeah, for sure. And I really love the quote that you read from the participant there, because that's exactly what young people, at least in Kenya, are saying, that this is not just a young people's problem. It's about, if we're able to get this right, this will spread, these solutions and these interventions and these benefits will cut across the different generations and even, the different age groups. So what young people are really asking for in Kenya is just a little bit of intergenerational solidarity. And I'm saying this because in Kenya, and I think most of the African countries, there's a bit of us versus them when it comes to conversations around making, empowering young people. You're like, most older generations feel like young people are just playing video games. They're simply just rioting and with really nothing to show for it. So I think it's around really saying that young people have the skills, young people have the energy, they have the passion, and they have the ideas. So what we need is, can we come together and really give them the respect and the solidarity they need so that they can bring all this to life?
Amazing. Marina, final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I fully agree with my speaking partners, so shout out to them. Yeah, at the end, I have a very short, but I think very important message to politicians. So politicians just need to rely on Roma and young Roma experts rather than, it's just a target group, and give us the space and also the resources so we can make the decisions on the issues that are affecting our lives rather than just being, consulted. It is a time for Roma to enter the political arena in an adequate numbers and adequate roles as well. And yeah, if you didn't see or if you couldn't read my t-shirt, and the messaging is Roma woman is whoever she wants to be, and also Roma man, black women, Asian women, Latina, everyone should be whoever they want to be. And this is my message to the younger people out there, that if you work enough and if you are persistent, then you can be whoever you want to be.
Well, those are powerful messages. And I can tell you all that I'm walking away from this conversation certainly feeling like the glass is not just half full, but almost full. And there's a lot more to go. Thank you all for the tremendous work you're all doing on the ground. Keep it up and come back and see us again soon. Thanks to all of us. Today's conversation has been enlightening, rich, inspiring, with examples of how governments and organizations can defend democracy. I hope you all feel the same way. Listen, it's a complex and important topic, and you'll continue to see FP covering it. A big thanks to NDI for supporting today's event. We hope you'll join us in upcoming events, including FP's broad coverage at the UNGA, where we'll host events in person and online on global health, energy security, food issues, tech, and more. That's September 19th, 20th, 21st. I'll be there and hope to see some of you on the ground in New York City. Stay tuned for updates from us and find out more about the lineup and other upcoming events at foreignpolicy.com. Take care, and we'll see you soon.